To Tapping in Part 1. I'm Lisa and I will be going over today's webinar with you. So hopefully most of you had an okay weekend considering the current situation. Hopefully you got to read lots of books, get all those jobs done around the house. It's a hard time for everyone, but if we all come together we can get through this. Okay, so today we are going to be going through the subsidies which are available in Australia for businesses when they would like to employ someone with an impairment or disability. There's lots of things out there that are available that many people don't know about. So we are here to spread the word on what you can do to employ someone with a disability or an impairment. Okay, so first up, welcome, and we'll just do an acknowledgement of country. 30-Foot Drop acknowledges the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognises their continuing connection to land, waters and the community. We pay our respects to the Indigenous people, their cultures and beliefs, to the elders both past and present. 30-Foot Drop would like to acknowledge the Department of Communities Disability Services for funding this and many other initiatives. Without their support, so many projects such as Two Wise Monkeys wouldn't exist and we'd be much more poorer as a community. This workshop is part of the Realities and Advantages of an Access and Inclusion Grant awarded to 30-Foot Drop as part of an Information, Linkages and Capacity Building Grant for 2018 and 2019. Next up, we'll go through some housekeeping on today's workshop. So unfortunately, we do not have all the resources to stream all of our platforms live. So if you have any questions for me today, there is a link under the video, which is www.30footdrop.com.au/live. You can jump in there and go to the live button, and there's a chat box where you can type me any messages or questions that you might have about today, or even if it's not even about today, it's about something else you'd like to talk about. No questions are off limits. Okay, we'll be covering a lot of information in a short period of time, so we recommend that all attendees, if possible, try to minimise any distractions, which we understand at this current time is very difficult, especially with kids around. I'm about to move this home, so that is going to be interesting with kids in the background and probably banging on the door while I'm trying to do this. Anyway, we'll give it a go. Okay, as well, if you talk about us on any social media platforms, can you pretty please make sure that you have tagged us, and so that we can get involved with that message getting out there, and then that also links people back to our page. And if you know anyone that might benefit from watching our webinars, please share our page with them, share these webinars with them. The more people that we can get the message across to, the better. That we have 6 webinars. They're all different, about different topics on how to go about employing someone with a disability or impairment. So we'll be running them until June. So if you miss out on a certain one, you can either re-watch them or you can join in at a later date. We'll be covering a lot of research in the webinars, so if you want to go into more detail on what I will be talking about, you can jump onto our 30-Foot Drop webpage and look under resources, and you can look more into the stats and information. There's so much information and we highly recommend having a look at that. At the end of the webinar, we have a short survey for everyone to fill out. So once we've ended the webinar, if you could please go to the website and hit survey 1, there's 5 questions, fill out the questions and send it in to us, because the more feedback we can get, the better. Okay, let me introduce myself. I'm Lisa, so I am one of the Two Wise Monkeys. The other monkey is Ben, and he is see no evil. Ben's story is completely different to mine. Unfortunately, he isn't going to be able to do the webinars for the next couple of weeks as because of the current health crisis. He's got other things that he needs to do. So I will be taking them for the next few weeks, all of them. But his disability is more one that you can see. Ben is in a wheelchair. Whereas my disability or impairment is more of a hidden one, and I will tell you my story now. At the age of 8, I was diagnosed with dyslexia. Teachers used to hit me on the head, yell at me, read out my low marks in front of my classmates. Why don't you understand? What's wrong with you? Making me feel completely dumb and unworthy. But despite all these challenges growing up, it only made me more determined to prove these teachers and people wrong. So I have multiple diplomas in the arts field, which have taken me all around the world. I used to picture framing for 12 years, organise exhibitions, do the marketing for the exhibitions, organise catering, anything to do with it, graphic designing website, invitations, all sorts of things, advertising, and yeah. So if you know anyone that may have dyslexia or a learning disability around you, or you have a child that might, there's lots of help out there that you can look into to get them tested. And also it's a matter of finding that passion that they love doing. My passion was art. I finally found something that I was good at age 13. I was drawing in front of my classmates, and the teacher came over and said, "Oh wow, that's really good," and showed the whole class and was explaining that this is what you need to do, this is how you do it. And I thought, wow, I can actually do something, and I actually have a teacher that has faith in me. So that's when I found my passion. So it's a matter of children or people with these learning disabilities to find their passion and go with it. And I'm so glad that I found that passion, because it's taken me all around the world and I've done lots of exciting things with it. Okay, so next up we have the third monkey. Isn't there normally 3 wise monkeys? So now I ask you, who is the third monkey? Have you guessed right? It's you. So today, the aim of today's webinar is to turn you into a wise monkey. You'll begin on a journey of realizing that, impairment or not, we are all human and deserve to be treated with the same respect and acknowledgement as every other human being. So, very important message. We are all the same. We are all human. We all have different little things that are different to everyone else, but that doesn't mean that we should be treated in a different way, especially people with a disability and impairment. It's already hard enough for these people as it is. Okay, so outline and method of today's webinar. So how are we going to get you started on the path of a wise monkey? Well, there's a lot to learn about people with impairment and the opportunities they represent as employees in your business. First up, we'll examine and bust some of the myths around employing someone with an impairment. There's lots of different myths and rules and regulations that people think apply to people with disability and impairment, but I think you'll find that most of them it's not the case. After our little Mythbuster session, we will get down to the brass tacks and look at the subsidies available when employing someone with a disability or impairment. So these subsidies are all for Australia. I understand there could be other people from around the world now watching because we have lots more views. So if I go over something that doesn't necessarily apply to you in your country, well then it's something you could look into trying to get in your country. The final subject will be workplace modifications and how to access these through funding. And to finish off, we'll do an open forum session where you can ask any questions. But like I said before, you can ask any questions along the way anyway. Okay, how are we going to cover this? What will our teaching method be? The answer is fun, open and honest discussion. Nothing can get sorted out unless we are honest and open. So, getting those questions forward, getting the information out there to make a change is what we're all here to do today. You'll notice that there's very little written content on these slides, and that's to make it easier for you to interact, so you're not having to try and read the screen and keep up, and if you're taking notes, you're not having to try and write everything down. But I will say that once we finish the webinar, you can then rewind it and rewatch it. So if you've missed anything, you can go back and watch it, or you can go into the resource library if you want to look further into those details. Next is terminology and review. Lots of people get disability and impairment mixed up, thinking that it's the same thing. So I'm just going to read a little bit about each one to prove to you that it's not necessarily the same thing. So to reduce confusion and ensure understanding, I want to review the terminology that we will be using in our Two Wise Monkeys sessions. First up is the difference between impairment and disability. An impairment is an injury, illness, or congenital condition that causes or is likely to cause a loss or difference of physiological or psychological function. In short, your impairment is your medical diagnosis. So my medical diagnosis is that I have mild dyslexia. A disability, on the other hand, is the loss or limitation of opportunities to take part in society on an equal level with others due to social and environmental barriers. It is, as the word implies, something that makes you unable to participate in something. So, say for example, Ben, who's in a wheelchair. If you owned a cafe and the only way to the cafe was that there were stairs, then Ben is unable to access your business. So it just makes sense. Disability is when you're unable to do things and take part in society on an equal level. So my example would be that too much wording, complex information, or stylized script can sometimes make it hard for people with dyslexia or any other learning disabilities to understand. So it makes it hard for these people, or myself sometimes, to get the right information that we need to use your service. This is especially important information to remember because some people's disabilities are hidden. So hopefully that makes sense to everyone. If you have any questions about that, please send them in to me. Next is the difference between access and inclusion. Access refers to the removal or reduction of barriers, physical and attitudinal, to participate in activities and functions of a community. It is, at its core, access focuses a lot on the physical world around us and can easily be assessed with a checklist. Inclusion is more of a psychological state of being and is the process hereby every person, irrespective of their age, disability, gender, religion, sexual preference, or nationality, who wishes to, can participate fully in all aspects of an activity or service in the same way as anyone else. So now that we've cleared that up, inclusion is more making the person, no matter what age, sexual preference, religion, disability, impairment, no matter what they have, they are included in your business or service and creating a more of an equal world. There's lots of places out there that aren't inclusive, and our message is to make your business or service more inclusive. Okay, if there's any questions, once again, please send them to me. Next is the myths and realities. Let's have a look at the myths and realities that exist when employing someone with a disability or impairment. These myths aren't just random statements that have been plucked out of the air. They are 7 reoccurring reasons why employing people with an impairment, why people aren't employing people with impairment from all around the world. So these are really, really interesting myths where lots of people had no idea. Okay, myth 1. People with an impairment need expensive modifications in order to be a productive employee. Okay, this is not true. Impairments are like people. Every single one is unique, and not everyone with an impairment needs special modifications. Our advice is to ask their potential employee and find out what it is they do or don't need. Ben, my boss, readily admits that getting adaptations for impairments are expensive. Wheelchairs can cost up to $20,000 and up. Having a car modified could be $50,000 and up. But the thing is, most of the time someone with these types of impairments already have these things and they don't need more. So, because they're using these things in daily use. So most of the time you can employ someone and there's actually nothing that they're going to need. If an employee with an impairment does not need a modification, does need a modification, then they are often easy to work with and inexpensive. There is also a good chance that it's not the first time they've been asked about this, so they'll know how best to work around it. So all you need to do is ask. Finally, if the required modification is expensive, then there's funding available, which we will cover in a later session. So it just shows that people with an impairment do not necessarily require expensive adaptations to work at your workplace. And there's funding available through Job Access, which we will be discussing in a later session. Okay, let's move on to myth 2. Myth 2. People with an impairment are frequently absent from work. Once again, not true. This couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, the reality is the opposite. According to the Disability Investment Group, The Way Forward, a new disability policy framework for Australia 2009, stated that 86% of employees with an impairment have the same or superior attendance rate than any other workers. Studies show that they also have a reduced turnover rate, which means less onboarding costs for you and your business, meaning you are actually saving money. Why is this the case? Well, studies show that people with a disability or impairment have an unemployment rate which is double the rest of society. It's absolutely crazy that it's double. For people with a disability or impairment, it takes them on average twice as many job applications before they land a job. One of Ben's friends actually applied for a job 183 times before landing a job. So due to this difficulty being able to be employed, people with a disability or impairment view the job as a great privilege and know that they will go the extra mile to keep that job because they don't want to be applying for another 183 jobs again. Okay, myth 3. People with impairment are only suited to unskilled work. Once again, not true. People with impairment have a range of skills, talents, and abilities. The Australian Bureau of Statistics reported that in 2012, 19.9% worked as professionals, 14.1% worked as clerical or administrative workers, 15.2% worked as technicians and trades, 11.6% run their own business, and 33.7% worked from home. So that's amazing figures. And, those that are working, amazing opportunities for them. We just need more. My workers' compensation premiums and safety incidence rates will go up. Not true. Employing someone with an impairment does not affect your premiums. Insurance underwriters look at the incidence history of the workplace and the workers' compensation, not the number of people with impairments employed. That's interesting. Further to that, studies have shown that employees with an impairment are up to 6 times less likely to have a WHS incidence and are more likely less likely to lodge a workers' compensation claim, which will lower the business insurance. It is thought that the reason for this can be attributed to the difficulty many people have getting a job and finding a job that have a disability or an impairment. If you find it hard to find employment, you're not going to risk that employment by breaking rules and cutting corners. You're going to do the right thing because, once again, you don't want to have to be applying for 183 jobs again. So these people are so grateful for these opportunities, and we as a society need to offer that. Myth 5. People with impairment are less productive. Not true. Studies have shown that when matched with a job that is within their ability, people with impairment are just as productive as any other employee. Couple this with the reduced absenteeism, reduced WHS claims and workers' compensation, retention makes sense. And people whose productivity is significantly reduced as a result of impairment may like to consider the supported wage system. So with the supported wage system, eligible people with an impairment can access a reliable process productivity-based wage assessment to determine fair pay for fair work. We'll cover this shortly. Okay, myth 6. Workers with impairment will not fit into my workplace. Not true. Most of these, not true. In most cases, co-workers' acceptance comes with awareness and observing that the workers are competent and efficient in their jobs, regardless of their impairment. People with an impairment make up to 20% of the Australian population, and the likelihood of clients and co-workers having a relative or friend with a disability or impairment is high. Studies show that the employer initiatives in hiring people with impairment can have a positive bottom line result for your whole team, increasing staff morale and community recognition as good corporate citizens. In conclusion, your workers are just like anyone else and they need to be given that chance. Myth 7. If they don't work out, I cannot discipline or fire them. Not true. Employing a person with a disability or impairment is the same as any other worker. You must establish clear performance expectations from the start, and if they are unable or unwilling to do the job, then you can take further action as per normal. There is no specific laws to prevent you from disciplining or terminating an employee who is unable or unwilling to do the job. So I hope you understood all those myths that I've just run through. Please feel free, if you have any questions, to send me anything you want to ask, even if it's to do with the myths or unrelated. Next, we are going to be looking at the subsidies available for Australians and the businesses and services. So what subsidies are available? When employing a person with an impairment, there are various opportunities depending on the job seeker profile and role hours. These are designed to offset training and other costs during their initial period of employment. This is an amazing incentive to employers. These subsidies can be released as a lump sum or a flexible payment, contingent on the awards rate being paid, the minimum hours being worked as per the agreement, the employee being registered with a disability employment service provider, which we go into more detail tomorrow in webinar 2. So now we will go over what these subsidies are, the time frames and how much they are. These are basic outlines and there will be further criteria which applies. Okay, 4 options. First up is the wage subsidy. This is $1,500 and the requirements are: employees need to be registered with a DES provider, which is a disability employment service, and the candidate will need to average a minimum of 8 hours a week over 13 weeks, with the intention of going on to doing 26 weeks, and the payment is still made if the job does end at 13 weeks. Great incentives. Okay, wage start is number 2. This is $6,000. Requirements are that employee is once again registered with a DES provider, is under 50 at the time of employment, and has been a long time unemployed, which is people whose duration of active job searching has been 52 weeks or longer, and will need to receive on average 15 hours per week over a 26-week period. Okay, number 3, wage start, restart subsidy. Okay, we're now getting into the bigger numbers. This is $10,000. The requirements for this are to be registered with a DES provider, you're over 50 years old, unemployed again for 52 weeks or longer, and you need to receive at least 20 hours per week over a 26-week period. So with these hours on all of them, you can chop and change it a bit. You can say work 8 hours one week and 16 the next week, as long as at the end of the 26-week period it has all worked out to be 20 hours per week. So 1 hour your employee could do 20 hours, the next they could do none. As long as it works out to be 20 weeks over that 6-month period, then that's fine. Okay, supported wage system. This particular subsidy is more complicated, but in short it revolves around the concept of fair pay for fair work. It's a productivity-based wage system, which allows candidates who cannot perform all job requirements to receive the productivity wage and not to disadvantage the employer financially. So an assessment determines a gap between the actual required or standard performance due to the worker's health condition or disability, and the percentage of the hourly rate is then payable. For example, if it's determined someone is producing 70% of the job requirement, then the relevant award is applicable, but only at the 70%. So they are only paid 70% of that award rate or that hourly rate which is paid. So it makes it fair for everyone. Okay, how can employees access these subsidies? Get in touch with your local DES provider. We will be discussing more of how to do this in tomorrow's webinars, so join us for that. What is job access? Job access is the national hub for workplace and employment information for people with a disability or impairment. Employers and service providers, which employs, is the national hub for workplace and employment information for people with disability, employers and service providers in Australia. It is funded by the Employment Assistance Fund, which is a government service. They offer assistance for workplace modifications that assist people with a disability or impairment to gain meaningful employment. So, workplace modifications. Workplace modifications can be used for the cost of making adjustments to the physical workplace. They could also be used for modifications to the workplace, such as vehicles or specialist equipment for the workplace. You could also use them for information and communication devices. Use them for Auslan interpreting services, so that's sign language, or specialist services or employees with specific learning disorders or mental health conditions. So you can bring someone in that may want to help with mental health conditions or learning conditions to help that employee. Use them for a whole team in your workplace for disability awareness training or for workplace other training things for deaf awareness. Bring someone in that can teach them some Auslan so that they can all communicate with the person that might have a hearing impairment. and once again, mental health awareness and first aid training. So all of these grants and subsidies available can all help with these modifications and help everyone work together as a team. No matter what is going on with the person with a disability or impairment, they're made to feel inclusive because there's been training and awareness brought into it, not just put in a situation where no one understands what's going on or how to deal with it. Okay, the application process. Most disability employment services will facilitate and arrange any assessments that are required. They know what they are doing and are brilliant, but you can also do it yourself. So, you submit the application to Job Access. Jobs Access assesses the application. If the application is successful, Job Access advises if a workplace assessment is required. If you're asking for something big, they will come and assess it and look for the required information needed. If there's no assessment required, then workplace purchases the goods, services, and gets reimbursed by Job Access. If required, Job Access will arrange a specialist to come to the workplace to look at these modifications, and if they're there looking at the modifications you might need for, say, a wheelchair, someone with a vision impairment or hearing impairment, get them to have a look at anything else that you may want to go over for that person coming into your workplace. And once again, workplace purchases, the goods and services get reimbursed by Job Access. Okay, funding caps. Physical workplace adjustments and building modifications are capped at $30,000. Auslan Level 1 interpreting for work-related activities and employees who are deaf or have a hearing impairment, including remote interpreting and real-time captioning, is capped at $6,000 in a 12-month period. Auslan Level 2 interpreting is for job interviews and related activities such as site visits, completion of tests and information sessions for people who are deaf or have a hearing impairment, and the funding is uncapped. Auslan Level 2 interpreting is to help co-workers receive training in Auslan Level 2 to communicate with employees who are deaf or have a hearing impairment, and those that use Auslan as their main method of communication. This is capped at $855. Disability awareness training. If you employ a person with a disability, you can apply for funding for disability awareness training for the workplace. This is capped at $1,500 per person with a disability or employment. So you can have someone come in, you've got someone that has a vision impairment, for example. So that one person's come into your workplace and you can organise a disability awareness training workshop for your whole workplace so that it revolves around disability and awareness and then involves the vision impairment or the deaf impairment so that people can understand how to work with that employee. So there's all these amazing things that you can get for your business when you do employ someone with a disability or service. You're not just handed this person and no one knows what to do or what to say or how to act or how to communicate. There's lots of things in place to make it an easy transition for both sides, the employee and the employer. So that is webinar part 1. I hope that you all understood everything that I've spoken about today. There's a lot of information in there, and the information of course is different in every country, but if it's something that you think your country might need or these services are great ideas, then start thinking about it. Write down some information that you could take forward to your service providers. Okay, so now I'm going to ask if anyone has any questions, if they could please jump into the chat box, which is the link below this video, www.30footdrop.com.au/live. I will turn the camera off for 5 minutes to give everyone a chance to send any questions to me. I'll be back in 5 minutes to ask any questions. But if you do have to go, that's totally fine. If you could please fill out the survey before you go, that'd be awesome, because any feedback we can get is good feedback. Okay, I'll see everyone else in 5 minutes. Thank you for joining me. Okay, so welcome back. There doesn't appear to be any questions today, which is fine. I hope you all enjoyed today, and it's sometimes quite nice to tune in, even me being here. It's nice to take my mind off what's going around the world. So if you need more of that, head over to us tomorrow. We'll be doing webinar part 2 tomorrow, and then 3 on Thursday, and the last couple next week before the school holidays start, where we have a little break. I hope that you're all as well as you can be and looking after each other. And remember that if you know anyone that's older or maybe struggling, please make sure you contact people that are alone or struggling, because it's I just can't imagine how hard it must be. Imagine being on your own, knowing that you could be on your own for 6 months. So depressing. We need to check in with every single person that we love and care about, make sure they've got everything they need. Um, as far as food and support, ring them up, even if you haven't talked to them for a long time, ring them up and make sure that they're okay. We all need to come together and work together and make sure that everyone pulls through this together in one piece. It's a very difficult time. But anyway, I'm glad that you joined me today. Please, if you know anyone that may benefit from this webinar, I'll be on again tonight at 6 o'clock Australian Western Time, and then tomorrow at 11 a.m. and 6 p.m. again Australian Western Time for webinar part 2. Anyway, take care of each other. See you soon. Bye.